So good evening. How's everyone doing? Good? Oh, I love that. Okay, on this cold evening. My name is Sara Bunting. I am the vice president at the 19th, and we are thrilled to have you all here for our final event for the year. This is great, and it's good for us to, just be together to be talking about these, important topics. So for those of you who are not familiar with the 19th, we are a nonprofit newsroom reporting at the intersection of gender, politics, and policy. So we were founded in 2000, and we're named after the 19th Amendment, which granted some women the right to vote, though many were left out. The asterisk in our logo represents the unfinished work of the 19th Amendment and the idea of civic equality in the United States as a work in progress. Our work aims to elevate the voices and stories of women and queer people, especially those who have been marginalized in our democracy. Our journalism takes many forms, right? We publish online, and we are free to read and republish. Our newsletters are another way for you to be connected with us, as are our events, which what brings us here together tonight. We are here to talk about what's next for caregivers and the care movement. How do we support family caregivers and their loved ones in this fraught political moment? And where can we look to for creative solutions? Before I begin, I want to take a moment to thank Indeed for hosting us in this very beautiful space. Thank you so much. And thank you to our sponsor, the Stardust Fund, for making this event possible. So I'd like to introduce the founder and president of the Stardust Fund, who is also an experiential artist, to share about her work, Monuments to Motherhood. Please welcome Molly Gotchman.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we all know that the 19th, and by the way, thank you for having me here. Welcome tonight. The 19th was started because Emily, Amanda, Aaron, and other journalists saw that women and people of color were being underrepresented in news. I started a series called the Monuments to Motherhood because I saw that women and people of color and caregivers were underrepresented in public. When I go uptown for my doctor's appointments, I pass quite a few monuments, and they are all white guys on horses commemorating some battle. I've never heard of most of them. If you walk through Central Park, the one that people take the most pictures with is Christopher Columbus. Like, this is how bad our landscape is for monuments. And I wanted to create monuments to show how we value caregivers, because we should be valuing caregivers, right? Like, care is so undervalued. 3/4 of the people giving care in the world are women and girls. When I create the sculptures, I start by creating what we call an armature. So for these armatures, I raided my kitchen cabinets and got bowls and saran wrap and aluminum foil and created the base. A lot of care work is unseen, right? Invisible. So this is the invisible structure that goes under it. And then I create these loops that I place on top of them. Now, the loops are always in relationship to each other. They support one another. And all my work deals with relationships in some way. Almost all my work, I think all my work uses really inexpensive materials. Right now, I have work at the Ukrainian Museum and in Astor Levy Park, and it's all made using refuse from construction projects. But for the monuments, I needed to use bronze for quite a few reasons. I wanted it to outlive me, and I needed it to be in the language of high art and the language of monuments. And I love the magic alchemy of bronze. As I said, I'm a social practice artist. All my work is participatory. All my work deals with relationships. When you touch the bronze, the oils from your skin are changing it. So I'm inviting all of you to touch them tonight. And they're changing it in ways that you can't predict. So just like care itself, you don't know how you might be transforming someone, but you are affecting someone, right? And these oils are changing it. And the places where you rub bronze the most, it changes the most. So when I wanted to have a more expansive definition of both monument and motherhood. I actually almost called these monuments to caregiving, though, because I was so nervous that they would be considered like seen as bioessentialist. And I don't see motherhood as bioessentialist. I want us to mother everything. I want us to mother our planet. I want us to mother our neighbors. I want us to mother our friends. I want us to mother each other and ourselves. So I wanted to be more expansive motherhood. And I went out to dinner with Emily and I said, I'm not sure what I should do because I don't want it to be bioessentialist, but monuments to caregiving just falls flat and monuments to motherhood sounds better and care is so gendered. She said, oh yeah, definitely monuments to motherhood. I was like, well, we're all here tonight because of Emily, so I better listen to Emily. So monuments to motherhood it is. And I wanted more stories about care. I want to hear everyone here's story about care because all of you have so many of them. But in order to get different stories about care out there and to learn from different caregivers, I created a podcast called Monuments to Motherhood. And I hope you download it and listen to it. And in creating the podcast, when I started creating the sculptures, I thought I was creating them for my children, right? I wanted there to be something to support them when they lost me and when they were facing death themselves, hopefully without me, right? So something that was strong and would support them and make them feel held. And actually, when I look at these, which Grace, who's here, helped me get the finish right on them, these have this undulating quality that doesn't make them feel like pipes, but also the way they flop on one another reminds me of being held or holding. And I really want them to make people feel held, right? So what I realized is that this linear way of thinking of these being created for that which comes after. I learned from Lawana Kimbrough that we are faith made flesh, right? We are walking monuments to our ancestors. So all of us here are monuments. And these are monuments to all of us because all of us here are caregivers. So we are faith made flesh. We are walking monuments that care is not linear, that it's moving forward and backwards in time. It is a loop. And that caregiving is a generational act and a generational art. And it's really about learning, right? Because we're learning something new all the time with care. And I am so excited to be learning from Ijen, Brianna, Brandee, oh my goodness, I'm so embarrassed. Brandee, who's also from Memphis, and hopefully we get some monuments in Memphis soon. So Ijen, Brandee, Reshma, and Sara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Molly. These pieces are beautiful. A quick reminder that our sponsors, they help us to keep these events free, but they play no part in the programming of our events. It is our hope that you will leave today feeling inspired and empowered and with some tangible ways that you feel like you can make a difference. Okay, so it is time to begin. I am very excited to introduce this fantastic panel of leaders and caregivers. Leading the conversation is Sara Luterman, the 19th disability and aging reporter and one of only a handful of openly disabled journalists dedicated to covering these issues. Sara is an award-winning journalist who has written for many leading outlets and has been a contributing editor for the WNYC podcast Radio Lab. Brandee Evans is an actor and caregiver. She stars as Mercedes on the critically acclaimed Star series P-Valley. Yes, give it up for that. An amazing show. She's an advocate for caregivers inspired by her personal experience caring for her mother, who battles MS and Alzheimer's. Brandee is a founding member of the Creative Care Council through Caring Across Generations and recently launched her Caregiver Strong apparel and merchandise brand. It's amazing. Okay. Next up is Aijin Pu, is a labor leader, organizer, and author. She's the president of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, executive director of Caring Across Generations, and a trustee of the Ford Foundation. Much of her career has been focused on the care economy, and she is the author of the celebrated book, The Age of Dignity, Preparing for the Elder Boom in a Changing America. And finally, Reshma Saujani is an activist, the founder of Girls Who Code, and the founder and CEO of Moms First. She has spent more than a decade building movements to fight for women and girls' economic empowerment, and most recently fighting for the structural changes moms need and deserve, including affordable childcare, paid leave, and equal pay. Please welcome our panel.
Thank you, Lashara. So I've been looking forward to speaking with each of you, so let's just dive right in. Let's start with a round robin question that I want everyone to answer. What drew you to advocacy around caregiving?
Hey everyone. Oh, this is loud. I speak loud as well. How y'all doing today? Good, good. I'm so glad to be here and in New York. I get some cold weather. So excited about that. I know y'all may not be, but I am. So what drew me to caring, honestly, is my mother. So growing up, Grandma worked in a nursing home. She's from Turl, Arkansas. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. So I would see her go, we would literally just go visit my grandma at the nursing home. And I would just see care from my first sight there with my mother, my grandmother. And then when my mom got multiple sclerosis, she ended up in a nursing home, and that's the one thing that I said that I never wanted her to do, and I promised her I wouldn't, though I know that it has to be for some people. That was something in my family where I said, I want to make sure I take care of her. And so growing and learning day by day with this situation with my mom, and I'm just addicted to it. Even when the time comes when my mom is not here, I feel like I will still have some sort of connection with care.
When I moved to New York for college in the mid-90s, early 90s, I started volunteering in the Asian community here. And there was just this pattern of Filipina migrant domestic workers who were trafficked, and the cases were coming to the organization, and just wanting to learn about this pattern and what was happening. I actually just went to the parks and the playgrounds to talk to the nannies who were there, not far from here actually, Central Park, Riverside Park. And what I found was this incredible underground economy and army of women of color, lots of immigrant women whose work to care for children and older people and people with disabilities is the thing, the energy, the invisible force behind New York City and our global economy. And then later, my grandfather, as he lost his sight, he suddenly needed a level of care that we were not at all prepared to provide. And by this point, me and my sister were away from home. And so it was my father trying to find and manage care for my grandfather. And the last thing he wanted was, he said, anything but a nursing home. And we just couldn't find the right solution for him. We tried everything. We looked in the back of newspapers. We went to every community resource area, all the agencies that are supposed to help you. And we just couldn't find it. And he ended up in a nursing home and passed away, literally a shell of himself. And it was so undignified and heartbreaking, and I will never forget it, and I never want anybody to be in that position ever again. So it's all about real choices, real freedom, honoring the part of our economy and our lives that really does matter most, I think. It's at the core.
So powerful. I came to this issue as a mother. I had my second son, Sai, during the pandemic. Sai was born on January 25th. The world shut down on March 8th. I was 10 years into leading my organization, Girls Who Code. And, when pandemics hit, the first resources to go are to women and girls. And I found myself having to take care of a newborn baby in the pandemic, homeschool a 5-year-old, and save my nonprofit, Girls Who Code, from being shut down. And that September, half the girls we teach at Girls Who Code are under the poverty line and are Black and brown. And that September, so many of my girls were on their way to major in computer science, oftentimes be the first one in their family to go to college. But because daycare centers were shut down and schools were shut down, and their mothers were our essential workers, our teachers, our nurses, the very people who made our city and every city function. But because, their mothers, needed to go to work. And oftentimes what happened is so many of my students, instead of going to college, had to stay home and take care of their siblings. And you saw how living in a nation that has a broken structure of care, that doesn't have paid leave, that doesn't have affordable childcare, how that forces and pushes so many girls, in particular girls of color, into this generational cycle of poverty. And I had this aha moment that I could teach hundreds of thousands of girls to code, but if I didn't help their mothers, I actually hadn't solved anything. And that and sometimes I think, and many of us probably in our work, when you see something, you just can't unsee it. And I just saw it so clearly. So I stepped off of being CEO of Girls Who Code and decided to build another organization, even though the first one almost killed me. And here we are.
Thank you so much. So Aijen, this is more of a bigger picture question. What's next for caregiving advocacy? Not necessarily just in the next 4 years, but where do you think the arc of history is going in terms of where caregiving is going to be in 20, 30, 40 years?
Ooh, just the 20, 30, 40-year question.
Easy question.
It's anybody have more wine?
1,000 years.
So I think what is so extraordinary is that we are living in literally the age of care. I feel so fortunate to be on this stage with these 3 humans and know that we are in a time when there are stages like this and there are rooms like this where people are gathered talking about care and how to move this agenda forward all over this country. And we have built that. I mean, there have been generations of people who have fought for care, but we are at this totally different stage in the evolution of this movement and in the power of it. And there is nothing any election could do to take away from the power that has been built. That is not going away. That remains. It's the same power that was here a month ago, and we're going to keep building it. And I believe that we are the generation that is going to deliver an entirely new set of choices for future generations when it comes to care, real freedom when it comes to care, real dignity. And so we're going to have to really think strategically about how we build. We're going to have to take every threat as an opportunity to build, and we're going to have to stand in our power. And that is the only way we keep building it. And I think we can't cede any ground. And voters have voted for care. Few examples, just this election. Travis County, I was just talking to Emily. By the way, shout out to the 19th. Thank you. Thank you for telling the story. Women have always been protagonists in our politics and in our policy. But do we always tell that story? No. And thank you for always making sure that story is told. So Travis County, Texas, voters voted to raise taxes for themselves so that the poorest in Travis County could have universal access to childcare. In Missouri, Nebraska, and Alaska, voters voted to expand earned sick time. In Washington state, voters voted to protect the only long-term care benefit in the country from a ballot initiative that would have totally defunded it. So we are we are in a place where even though these things might have been possible 5-10 years ago, we are actually mobilized and organized, and we're visible in a totally different way. And we're gonna have to use every opportunity in the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years to keep making progress, but to specifically be building our power and reaching the women and the caregivers, the people all over this country who still don't know that solutions are possible and are still blaming themselves for how hard it is, and who still don't know that they are not alone. There are still millions of us who are in that position, and when we see it as our role and responsibility to bring those people in and to help those people see that they're connected to this powerful movement, that's when we really start to see a whole new realm of possibility. And I will say that there are times when it feels like huge policy victories are possible, and there are times when it's a different season, when you're seeding and building. No matter what, it is building. And we may be facing unprecedented attacks on essential care programs like Medicaid. That is one thing I'm really concerned about, because that is how so many people get care, and the people who need it the most. So we can talk more about that. But we have to use every opportunity to fight as an opportunity to build.
Thank you so much. Reshma, what are some private sector trends you see taking off to better accommodate working moms and other family caregivers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was also a big silver lining over the past, couple of years. When I started building Moms First, through my experience at Girls Who Code, Girls Who Code, one of the reasons why we were able to teach 600,000 girls to code and over $500 million was that we had so many private sector funders, because they too were desperately trying to build the pipeline of tech talent. And so when I started, entering this space, one of the things I saw or thought about was like, wow, where's the private sector on this issue? Because, if people don't have childcare, they can't work. And you really saw this in the pandemic. We went back to where we were in 1989 in terms of women's labor market participation. Remember, at the start of the pandemic, it was the first time that women represented 51% of the labor force. And literally within 8 months, we were back to where we were in 1989 because of our broken care infrastructure. And also, for so long, I think Ajin's point is right. We were blaming ourselves. Oh, I can't find childcare. Oh, that's my personal problem. I must be failing. I must be doing something wrong. Women, mothers, parents never thought that this is something I should expect from my state or the federal government or my employer. It was always seen as a personal issue. And we can go deep into American history to figure out how we kind of culturally convinced people that that was the case. So, for so long, if women had a child care issue or had to take care of an elderly parent, they'd put networking lunch on their calendar, right? They would never go in and say, I got to go, my child is sick, my parent is sick. And so, we pretended that part of our life just didn't exist. And when the pandemic happened, you couldn't pretend anymore. There it was, your kid, in the middle of your Zoom call, right? There it was. And so people suddenly go, oh, you got kids? You have caregiving opportunities? And it opened up the conversation, right? To the true reality of people's experiences in their lives. And so it started, you saw in the beginning of the pandemic, a real increase in the amount of childcare subsidies and childcare benefits and paid leave benefits and caregiving benefits that were being offered. In the private sector, as Ajin will tell you, right, it was not an ally, during Build Back Better, right? It was often the reason why some of these policies never got passed. And so many times in the movement, there wasn't a lot of trust that they could be an equal partner, in this fight. And I think in many ways, the pandemic really started changing that. And so one of the first things that we built was a national business coalition on childcare. One, to kind of take advantage of the moment and the fact that more women and more men were, quite frankly, being more vocal with their employers, saying, hey, I need you to do something about this. For example, one of our partners, Steamboat Casinos, lives in a rural area. And the one childcare facility in their community shut down. Everybody came to work was like, I can't come to work. And so Steamboat was like, oh, I got to build the daycare center. And they did. And there were so many of these kinds of stories. UPS, one of our partners, has a huge facilities, and they realized that so many people were starting to miss work, and quite frankly, it was having an impact on their bottom line because they couldn't send their packages out. And so, they had, one of their employees, one of their best employees, was on her third strike in terms of like, if she missed one more day of work, she was going to get fired. And that morning she woke up and she said, am I leaving my child at home? Or am I going to my job so I can put food on that table? Which is a choice many people have to make every single morning. And that was the day that UPS had launched their backup care facility. And so again, so this then changed. So we went from having 5 companies as part of our National Business Coalition on Childcare to 250 today. And the thing we've done besides, one, getting them to increase the kinds of benefits that they're offering, we provided the data that didn't exist. So there was never an ROI study that was ever done that showed like when businesses actually offer childcare, it means that they make their money back. And we did the first ever study with BCG on that, showed that you had a 425% return. And if only 1% of eligible employees actually use that childcare benefit, it pays for itself. So now anytime you see a CEO being like, I just can't afford it, not true. And there's actually data there. And then the third piece of this, which I'm very excited about, is now getting these CEOs to be full-throated advocates of public policy on childcare. And so what we've been doing, and we've done this with our partner Amazon, is getting them not just to provide childcare benefits for their employees, but to provide childcare benefits for their community. And so this is a radical shift that has really happened, over the past couple of years, and through much of the work that we've done. And I'm literally on, like, Ajin knows because we both speak at these, we're like on our 3rd childcare business conference, right? It's like, that's bananas, right? That there's so much interest in the business community on figuring out how to solve this problem. And that's really exciting.
Thank you. So Brandee, as a working caregiver, what kinds of support are you getting from your employer? Obviously, being the star of a critically acclaimed TV show is not quite a typical career, but are there some things that you get from your job that you wish other people had, or are there some things that are more difficult?
No.
Okay.
The simple answer. With what I do for a living, the help is not there. Honestly, just being honest, they can just replace you, So as I was listening to what you said, I do hide. I do hide a lot of things that are happening with my mother. Because I look like a liability to the lead of a TV show. You don't have time to tell them you can't find a caregiver because they'll find someone else. So I've got an amazing village. Perfect example, we're here, let's just be transparent. Ajin got a text today, the caregiver walked out right before I came in here today. So, and the one before that walked out on Sunday. So literally up until I got on the stage, I'm looking for caregivers and trying to figure it out. And I have an audition, one that I've prayed for. So it's like a huge audition, but also, like you said, I can't work if I don't have caregivers. So we don't have that. So I am looking, that's another reason why I tell people I'm a caregiver first and then I'm an actor. So I make that very clear because I know that there are other actors out there as well that are caring for their loved ones, and I don't want it to be where we have to hide. But right now in the industry, that is not something that is something that they're gonna necessarily work with. They will just replace you. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work, and I'm hoping that we have more care stories, which with care stories online and in movies and things of that sort, you're able to see. On 911, for instance, the show 911 with Angela Bassett, they had a character whose mom had multiple sclerosis on there, and she was working in the call center at the 911 call center while trying to also take care of her mother with multiple sclerosis. But I can't remember many more shows or movies that show that on TV as well. So that's something that I'm looking forward to being able to show on TV and screen, and maybe if we see it more, we'll be able to do it. But unfortunately, like when I was a high school English teacher, I could call in, we have a problem. You can't do that on a TV show. Mm. I just have to figure it out. So that's where we are now.
Thank you so much. Ajin, how are organizers approaching a second Trump administration? What care policy priorities might be advanced in the next 4 years, and what big fights do you see on the horizon?
Well, first, just to follow up on something that Brandee was talking about, I just think that this is such a powerful reminder of, in this economy, there's so many people who will fall through the cracks of systems that are not universal and national in scope and scale. The fact that we don't have a national paid family medical leave program, right? We're one of the only countries in the world who doesn't have one. 0 weeks. So yeah, you can have a great employer who has it, but the millions of moms and caregivers who have nothing, how do we help them? And the artists and the independent contractors and all of the people who work in segments of the economy that are not covered by any kind of safety net. Those are the people that we have to prioritize as we're designing the policies of the future, because that is the future. We have to think inclusively and expansively about how we design policy so that everyone can be covered and supported and have a safety net, right? And so part of that is the safety net that this time, as I said, is a time of building and continuing to build the power of the movement. And the slogan that it keeps coming into my head is protect what we've earned, programs like Medicaid, Head Start, programs that we know millions of people count on for care. And then create what we need, seed what we need. And so as we're fighting, we know next year that there's going to be a major tax fight, right? There's going to be an attempt to expand corporate tax cuts, move more tax cuts to corporations and billionaires. And the only place that major tax cuts like that can come from is Medicaid. If you want to deliver $2 trillion in tax cuts, the only place it can come from is Medicaid. And 80 million people count on Medicaid, children, new moms, caregivers, people with disabilities. Most people who receive long-term care in this country, whether in a nursing home or at home, get access to it through the Medicaid program, because we don't have an alternative. We don't have a long-term care program in this country. So Medicaid is that. So we have to protect Medicaid. We protect what we've earned as we imagine what more we need and seed the ground for that. And organizers, I think, are prepared to do that. And we want to not just talk about don't cut Medicaid. We want to talk about, and we need Medicare to cover long-term care, and we need respite care for family caregivers, and we need affordable quality childcare, and we need paid leave, and engaging people in the conversation about both what we have and need to protect and the future of the policies that we actually deserve.
Thank you so much. Brandee, what do you wish the government or businesses were doing to better support family caregivers like you?
I think what we're doing now is a perfect example. Sitting on this panel, discussing it. It needs to be something that is not out of the norm. Like, I was excited to figure out, like, how can I get to New York? I really want to be there because it's not something that's talked about as much as it should be. And so I think that that's what we need to be doing more of, communicating more, making this the same way we talk about, oh, not this earring. Listen, you won't break my soul. Anyway, we need to continue having conversations like this, being transparent. I think curating more things like this makes me think, like, why can't I get a group of people together and talk about it in California as well? So this is actually motivational for me. The more that the more you put it in people's faces, the more people realize how important it is.
Absolutely. So Reshma, there's been a bit of a backlash to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the private sector in the past few years. Are you concerned about how that might impact progress for working moms and other caregivers, or is the movement to improve conditions for working moms and other caregivers sort of a separate thing?
God, I have so many things. Well, first I want to add to what you were saying. I also think there's and this is, I think, what the 19th is doing. There's such a huge opportunity to build content and still tell stories about caregiving. I launched my podcast, My So-Called Midlife, and I interviewed Yvette Nicole Brown. And literally it was like one of the most, like tens of thousands of people have listened to this episode. And her podcast that she launched called Squeezed with Lemonada. So I feel like we have to tell our stories and our content because there are so many people that are experiencing the same thing of caring for their elderly parents and they feel like they're alone. And so I think that that's really, really important. I think on the DE&I piece, do I feel like, look, the backlash against DE&I is absolutely affecting my Girls Who Code programs. Mm-hmm. Every single coding program that was started when I launched Girls Who Code in 2010 has been shut down, except for Girls Who Code, because we anticipated this backlash. I think what's interesting, though, is that Aja and I were just talking about this backstage when it goes back to the Trump administration. This may be a moment, though, to get some caregiving legislation done. One of the things that, we really pushed to do at Moms First was to elevate the question of childcare during the presidential election. And so we launched a campaign called Get Childcare on the Record and, had 15,000 moms sign a petition. CNN asked a question. Unfortunately, Joe Biden and Trump talked about their golf game instead of answering the question. But that then pissed off a bunch of moms. And so then, I actually, through the grace of God, got an opportunity to ask Trump a question about childcare at the Economic Club of New York. And yes, he did not answer it, to say the least. But what it did was then it went viral. It went viral. His response went viral, and then from HBO to CNN, everyone's talking about how you fix childcare. So it elevated the issue. In many ways. And then by the time we got to the VP debate, Evan Vance says, well, we got to spend money to fix childcare. Donald Trump starts that MSG rally by what? Making a commitment that he's going to do something to help caregivers. So if they're going to take away our reproductive rights, how are we going to take care of all these babies? Right? And so if they're the party of family, well, I guess that means we're going to have to hold you accountable. So as tough as this may be to say as a Democrat, the Trump administration might actually get something done on childcare. And if I have to be honest, as a Democrat, as a woman, as a mother, as a caregiver, I am sick and tired of our party deprioritizing our issues, promising to do the things that they never do. Just right now, all Biden has to do is literally publish the ERA, but he won't do it. And we have to stop being beholden to a party that continues to deny us our basic rights. And so I think that as far as I'm concerned, as an activist, as an advocate, I want to get it done. For women, for mothers, and at this point, I don't care what party gets it done, as long as someone does something. And maybe, just maybe, even if, during the child tax cuts, if we expand the CTC, if we expand the child care tax deduction, we expand 45F, maybe then this issue becomes a little competitive. And we don't have to keep begging and waiting for the Democrats to do something. Maybe it gets done. I don't know. But what I would say is that we have to just, it's almost like a relationship. It's like we have to just not be so available all the time. You know what I mean?
Brandee, your character, you touched on this a little bit already by talking about Angela Bassett's 911, but so your character's relationship with her mother on P-Valley is obviously very different than your relationship with your mother in real life. For folks who haven't seen the show, Patrice Woodbine is kind of like one of the villains. So you mentioned Angela Bassett's show already, but are there any other depictions of caregiving that resonate with you or that made you feel seen?
That's what I'm looking for. That's why we have to create, because we haven't seen that. I just did a movie, and it's called The Color Book, where I play the mom of a young man who has a disability. He has Down syndrome. And one of the things that was a big deal for me was that I was not going to take the role if he really did not have Down syndrome, because I feel like there's enough space for everyone to create without making it up. So he really does have the Down syndrome, and it was beautiful. It's doing amazing in the film festivals. So that was beautiful to be able to show the story of care in that moment. But it's not really there. We don't see it. We kind of gloss over it. So I'm looking for that. So I guess we need to create it. We got some actors out there too. Hey, Elvis. So I guess we need to create something like that so we can see it, because I think everyone, Elvis has been a caregiver. We've all been caregivers in some way in our lives, and I think we just have to create it for it to be seen.
Absolutely.
Can I mention something about this?
Yeah, I mean, it might be the answer to my next question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I was going to ask about representation of professional caregiving is underrepresented in media. I know that in 2022, the National Domestic Workers Alliance released a report that showed that there's few portrayals of workers who care for older or disabled people in television or in movies, despite that workforce mostly being those people. And also that the workforce is portrayed as much whiter than it actually is. Yes. Are there examples in media right now that you think really get it right, or this is still something that really needs to be improved?
Well, there's been a really intentional effort to try to push for more storytelling and to bring the experience of caregivers, both family caregivers and professional care workers, to the forefront. And Brandee is a part of the Creative Care Council at Caring Across Generations, which is a group of artists and storytellers who have personal care stories and who also want to help the rest of the storytelling world, the entertainment industry, actually bring these stories forward. And so they're both using their personal platforms, but also really trying to help us as a movement seed more storytelling in writers' rooms, among showrunners, screenwriters. And I do think that we're seeing a kind of momentum that is building. And if you think about like the last award season, American Fiction was a care story, right? Right now we have a film. We actually are partnering with Moms First and Moms Rising and Paid Leave for All, and in style to do this campaign called Mom's Night Out with Night Bitch. There's a movie coming out called Night Bitch that is about motherhood and parenting, and it is so powerful. Amy Adams stars in it. But it's going to be in the theaters, and it really brings forward an honest, raw, emotional, the innards of motherhood in a way that you almost never see. So we hope you'll go check out that film and be a part of the campaign. We just did 8 screenings, advanced screenings for moms, where we covered childcare for those who needed it in cities around the country. And so it'll be in theaters soon, and really it's incredible. But that and Color Book is extraordinary. It made the rounds in the film festival circuit, and we're finding at the festivals, these films are the ones that are just so popular and so celebrated because they're so resonant at a human level. And so I do think we're going to see more and more. It used to be just very earnest documentaries. Yeah, right. And now it's all kinds of stuff. Night Bitch is like a horror movie, kind of a comedy horror. So I think that's what's so exciting, is we're kind of at this cultural tipping point around these stories getting told.
Speaking of depictions of moms, Reshma, there's a lot more portrayals of moms in popular culture than other kinds of care workers. In March, Moms First released a report on how moms, particularly working moms, get misrepresented. What are some examples of common misrepresentation, and what are some examples of moms in media that you think are really getting it right?
Yeah, I mean, either you see like Carol Brady, where you never see a caregiver or a babysitter, and she's just, looking beautiful and just clean house, and it's just so perfect. And I think oftentimes mothers look at that and be like, oh my God, that's not me. What am I doing wrong? So it just exacerbates this sense of anxiety. Or you just see moms that are just crazy, drug addicts. You know what I mean? Like just losing it and just not, not able to really caregive. I don't really see like the authenticity of it. And I think this is the shift that you're seeing, whether it's with Night Bitch, whether, I just had Alana Glazer on my podcast. She's one of the first comedians, Babes. I don't know if anyone saw that, but really depicting the honesty about pregnancy and in the honesty about motherhood, that it's messy, that it's complicated, that sometimes, you love your kids, but sometimes you really just don't want to be around them. That the fact that like you don't get to do any of this without having caregivers that should be treated like God. That the complexity of like the sandwich generation, of the fact, I'm a geriatric mother. I'm 49 years old. I have a 4-year-old, a 9-year-old, and I have 2 almost 80-year-old parents, right? Like I am in it. And like there's no, so it's not just about affordable childcare, quite frankly, it's about care generally. And so I think that there just needs to, and I think that like, again, when you go, and I think it's changing now because I think people are a lot more honest and genuine about it, but you still either have ballerina farms, right? Trad wives, right? You still have that on that side of the culture. And then on our side, you didn't really have much. And so I think that the work that Ajin and them are doing and that we're doing of really kind of elevating and encouraging and shifting culture to not just tell the truth, but to also like I think what is not respected is not valued. Again, I'm still getting sold makeup that like Kylie Jenner's selling. You still don't go on Fifth Avenue, and if you talk to most people, right, that are models or creatives or artists or or actors, oftentimes when they become a parent and become a mother, if they're a woman, their career is over, right? And so a lot of that has to do with the very tastemakers that are actually defining, defining in many ways success as youth. And we're always still trying to chase the mirror in reverse. For women, you're George Clooney, you become finer with age like wine. More grays, more hotness. Opposite for us. So I think all of this is so kind of tied up, right, in like, I think what we need to change about the culture. And I do think it's very attached to public policy. Because again, what is not respected and valued is not actually pushed forward. We don't invest money in capital. Like, even if I think about, again, there are $0 in research dollars being put into menopause. The NIH doesn't even have a category for it because they literally assume that the older we get, the less relevant we are. We don't need to spend money on that. We don't need to put research into that. We don't need to, yeah, exactly.
Couch full of hot flashes right now.
I was like, I'm hot right now. I left my fan in the back.
Yeah. It's all interconnected. It's all women's health, and all of this is it's all interconnected.
So just sort of changing course a little bit.
Depressed you
No, my whole beat is depressing. That's right about disability and aging. So Brandee, so working full time and being a caregiver can be a really difficult balance to maintain. How are you, or are you maintaining your sense of self and well-being? Do you have any recommendations for other folks who are caring for? Yeah, I know we talked about this in the back.
Oh God, where's my fan, Matthew? This trip was supposed to be my self-care trip. I said I have one commitment. I'm gonna come to the 19th. I'm excited, and I'm gonna spend a couple of extra days in New York. Psych. Everything changed when the caregiver walked out. So I am learning still. Jen was just talking to me about it before we walked out. She's like, you have to figure out a way to take some time for you. And I was like, I know, but I just don't know how yet. Mm-hmm. So I say this to even people out there that are trying to figure it out. I don't know. Like, it's just do your best. Like I keep telling myself now, even sitting here, I'm like, is it possible to stay here one more day and just have one day in New York? But then I'm like, oh, but then I have to like figure out what I'm gonna do about my mom. So I'm trying to figure it out myself. I know that it's important. I have a therapist. I think that's important. So that's what I told my therapist. I was like, I'm going to New York and I'm going to stay extra days. I'm like, oh God, how am I going to break that promise now? But I'm trying to figure out how to make it work. I know it's important because I know that I can't be everything that my mom needs if I'm breaking down.
Yeah.
And she needs all of me. And so to be able to give her that, and it's so funny, Mama doesn't talk much. I don't know if any of you do see my Instagram. She doesn't talk much, but the night before I left for New York, she was able to talk. And she looked at me, and I think she could tell because I put on my actor face, where it's just like, I never want her to see me break, kind of like moms, where we don't want to see the kids to see us when we're breaking down. So I was like, everything's fine. And she looked at me like old Diana, like the Alzheimer's, it was like it left her face. And I said, Mama, what are you looking at me like that for? And she said, you're going to be okay. And I just broke. And I was just like, oh my goodness, she can see this. And so that is another reason why I'm like, I have to find the time for the self-care, because I also don't want her to feel like she's a burden. And I know that we feel like that sometimes as caregivers, and nobody wants to not be able to do what they're used to doing either. So I know that it's hard for my mom to see me try to take care of her and, be like, oh no, I can't go now. Like I heard her, she overheard me say I can't do something. And she looked at me and she's like, you're gonna get that job. And I was like, what, you was eavesdropping, Mama? Like you heard me? But so we have to take the time. I am working on it. I am working hard on it, but I have not figured it out yet. But I am at least trying to take the time for self-care because I know it's important.
That was also her taking care of you.
Yes, it was her taking care of me. Thank you for the fan.
And one thing is, and I know we all know this, but whenever Brandee texts me something's going on with the caregiver, or Reshma texts me like, what are we going to do about XYZ thing? That ability to show care for each other, it's a gift every time you reach out, because you give me the opportunity to support you. And that we have to remember. Like, it's never burdening. That's the only way we get through.
I needed to hear that because I feel like a burden all the time.
That's why I wanted to make it clear.
Thank you for saying
for
that.
The record.
But it does. It gets hard to ask for help, like just thinking like, oh, now you got to call your best friend. It feels like, and this is year 8 with me with Mama. And I'm like, so you ain't figured this out yet, Brandee? But it's also just a reminder that you never figure it out. And it's just like motherhood. Nothing's going to be perfect. So I'm reminding myself of that. So I needed to hear that. Thank you.
So I know we've touched on this a little bit in a couple of people's answers, but Reshma, many moms and other kinds of family caregivers, particularly women, get pushed out of the workplace. What's the economic impact of their unpaid, underappreciated labor? And likewise, what is the economic case for businesses to improve on programs like paid family leave?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the thing is we have to always ask ourselves, the United States is the most educated population of women in the world that has the least amount of labor market participation, right? The vast majority of high school valedictorians are girls. The vast majority of those getting their bachelor's degrees are girls. Now the vast majority of those getting their PhDs are women. But why is it when you look in any workforce, right, whether it's at Target or it's at JP Morgan, the senior ranks from management and up do not look like the incoming class. And people like to assume, oh, well, they want to become a mom and they just don't want to work anymore. Well, no one in this country can afford to not work, period. And so women are being forced because of childcare, or the lack of childcare, right? Remember, like we live in New York City right now, 50% of New York City is in a childcare desert. So because of the unaffordability of quality childcare, women are the ones that have to downshift their careers. And the reason why it's women are the ones that have to downshift their careers is because the minute you become a mother, you get a motherhood penalty. You lose 6% of your salary when you become a mom, whereas men get a 4% increase for every child that they have. So this is why you have women that are downshifting their careers, not raising their hand for their promotion, going from being nurses to Uber drivers, because they need the flexibility to provide care because they can't afford the childcare, because they essentially are working to work. And so this is why you have this inequity. And it's kind of, and you have to ask yourself and take a step back and say, is this a conspiracy, right? Is this a conspiracy? Especially with, I think, the attack on DE&I. Like, are we just really trying to rig, so that, quite frankly, people don't have to compete with us? And because, again, these are just pure facts, right? And every time, you remember, every time, right before the pandemic, we were 51% of the labor. We were making a tremendous amount of progress. And every time you have progress, progress will be dismantled. And so I think that, which is why what's important, why we've had to, instead of like talking about this like in inequity and injustice ways, we've had to talk about this in economic ways, right? Because, well, if you just want to hire the most talented people, why are you, letting them essentially having a leaky pipeline all throughout? And so I do think that businesses recognize that this is a reason why they're losing, talented women. And because you're having a shortage of men, we again saw this in the election, graduating with college degrees. And some of these white collar jobs in particular demand college degrees. You need these women to stay.
Yeah. So
you got to figure it out. And I think that's why you've seen an increase in interest in, quite frankly, offering some of these benefits, but you have to continue to, quite frankly, make the case. And what you're seeing, instead of people trying to figure that out, they're like, how do we get more men in these places?
That's a good question. So this is the last question, and I like to end on this kind of question just so that, because I know a lot of caregiving stuff can be very heavy. So this is a question for everyone. What makes you hopeful for the future of caregiving in the United States? Like what's really keeping you motivated? What makes you excited? Like what's happening right now that makes you feel good about the future?
This has actually motivated me today. I think the more like I was saying earlier, the more we're talking about it, I feel like we're not shying away. Women are speaking out more. Women and men are speaking out more about care, because while there are majority women caregivers, there are male caregivers as well. And I love that it's not a hidden thing anymore. People are really talking about it. People are speaking about it publicly. They're posting about it. Right. I have men that'll actually slide in my DM and say, I'm taking care of my mom too. Like what are your thoughts about this, which is beautiful. Right. And that, I feel like growing up, that was just the hidden thing. Back home, we just did it. We took care of Big Mama and we did the things, but no one spoke about it publicly. So I love that it's something that's being spoken about in the movies that are coming out. I'm so excited to see y'all's movie. I think the more that we're speaking about it and making it normal, a normal conversation, not just a hidden secret, is going to be great for us. I'm excited about that.
I am just always so energized by remembering how much genius there is among caregivers. Like, care requires so much genius. And when I think about what you do for your mom, and when I think about you parenting your kids, and then all of the domestic workers and caregivers that I work with in my movement, and how much strength and tenacity and power and resilience and all those things, there is just a special kind of genius when the thing that is not valued by society, but is at the core of who you are and how you anchor your dignity, is like, when you're able to do that day in and day out, there's just something really powerful and genius about it. And we get to harness that and change the world with it. And I just feel like I have the best job in the world, and we have the best movement in the world. It's kind of how
we do. I mean, I think I said earlier, like, once you see, you can't unsee. Yeah. And I think so many moms and caregivers are like, oh shit, I'm getting fucked. Right?
Facts.
And I think they're, yeah. And so I think it's like the intensity I think that we all experience, whether it's, you know what I mean, when people, react to like you talking about your mom and the movement, and like, and for us too, like the intensity of how people feel about this issue is like nothing I've ever seen before, right? And it makes you really, like, we're so freaking close, we can smell it. And that's incredible. I think the thing is we just got to figure out how to keep our foot on the gas. And the two takeaways I think I had after this election, one was that this is truly a bipartisan issue, and we got to figure out how to get some of our other sisters and brothers to be in this with us. Even if we were talking about this, we may agree on the things, but disagree on who the enemy is, right? And so that's a challenge for us to figure out how we can come together. And we may not agree about everything, but how we can come together on this and to get it done, because then we're unstoppable. The second thing I feel like I realize, and I say this as the Girls Who Code person and the moms person, is in the 30 years that I led my first march when I was 13, in the amount of time I've been working on these issues, I have not stood in solidarity with men. And that was a mistake. I married a good man, and after the election, he could not get out of bed. It's devastated. Still devastated. So there are so many men out there who feel as passionately as the three of us do. And I was like, damn, I gotta start recruiting them, And I think
dads first?
Yeah, dads first. Or like, I don't know, dads who love moms first. I don't know, right? But I think that that's an opportunity, right? That's like an opportunity that I'm really excited about for us all to figure out how we unlock that. And then again, like I think with those things, I think we are just unstoppable.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to share this time and experience with you, and for you all to share your wisdom and knowledge. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.